So, the Constitution is a special document written in 1787. It is a written plan for how the government of the United States works. It has a nickname, the highest law of the land, because every other law is supposed to follow the rules found in it. Now we are going to look at some specific things that make the Constitution so amazing. The Constitution has a lot of words in it, but none as famous as the first three words. The first three words of the Constitution are written with big letters and say, "We the people." Why do you think the Constitution begins with those words? Why does the Constitution begin with, "We the people"? Those are the words that open the Constitution, because that idea is the cornerstone of our country. You see, the U.S. government exists for the people, by the people. One of the reasons the colonists fought for independence from Great Britain was to get liberty and freedom for the people. The Constitution starts with "We the people" because it is not just written to set up the United States government. It is written for the people, by the people. You see, the Constitution not only was the plan for how the United States government would work, it also protects people's rights. The Constitution is made up of 7 articles and 27 amendments. The 7 articles mainly focus on how the United States government works. The 27 amendments are additions to the Constitution that came after 1787. Many of the amendments are written about the rights that people in our country have, while other amendments have clarifications about how the United States government works. None of the amendments contradict each other or contradict any of the 7 articles. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights. They protect the most basic freedoms of every American citizen. Rights are things that everyone should be allowed to do. For example, the First Amendment of the Constitution guarantees us freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly. There are some freedoms that took a long time but finally got added to the Constitution. For example, the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery. The 15th Amendment finally gave African Americans the right to vote, and the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. Just like amendments have been added in the past, there may be more amendments that could be added in the future. Maybe in your lifetime there may be 28 or 29 or even 30 amendments. We'll just have to wait and see. That is the Constitution, the highest law in the land. With 7 articles and 27 amendments, the Constitution not only shows us how the United States government operates, it also shares the rights and freedoms which we read last time, remember that? It also has 7 articles and 27 amendments. Can you remember those numbers? It has 7 articles and 27 amendments. I'll test you in a minute to see if you remember.
Now, just like your parents have rules for you to follow, America has a constitution under which rules are made that we must follow. Who makes these rules? Well, the Constitution tells us. Here's what it says. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Wow, those are some big words in there, right? Did you hear that? Legislative powers. Ooh, sounds like a superhero, right? Not a cow, I said superhero. Don't worry, we shouldn't be afraid of those words. The term means that Congress can make rules for the country just like your parents make rules for you. So the answer to our question, who makes the rules, is Congress makes the rules. Since these two groups make the rules for America, the people elected to those offices need to be wise. Therefore, the Constitution says they need to be old enough to serve in office. They can't be a little kid. A person can't become a senator until he or she is at least 30 years old. And a person can't become a representative until he or she is at least 25 years old. That means they have to be as wise and smart as your mom and dad are before they can be elected. Just think, maybe one day you'll be as smart as your mom or dad. And when that happens, do you think you'll be a senator or representative when you're that smart? Hey, the country needs you, so get real smart. So let's see what we've learned in this lesson. And to do that, let's play a little game show.
Amendments to the United States Constitution. The Bill of Rights is a very special part of the Constitution. The Constitution is the highest law in the United States. The Constitution has 7 articles and 27 amendments. That's right, 7 articles and 27 amendments. The word amendment means a small change to a document. Can you say amendment? Yeah, amendment. Amendment is a pretty cool word to say. There are 27 of these changes in the Constitution. The first 10 amendments are very special. They clearly define so many of our freedoms and liberties. There were many people in Congress who wanted the Constitution to guarantee our rights. Rights are privileges and freedoms that people deserve. They wanted to clearly define our freedoms so that the people of the United States wouldn't experience many of the things they fought to free themselves from during the American Revolution. We have mentioned that the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. That is what this video is about, but we have to answer this question. What are rights? What are rights? What are rights? Well, rights are freedoms that people deserve. These can be very basic. They are things that all people deserve to enjoy, or they are protections that people deserve to have. So the Bill of Rights could have been called the Bill of Freedoms that people deserve. But, Bill of Rights sounds better, doesn't it, Here's the thing. The first 10 amendments guarantee and protect our freedoms and limit the power that the government has to do certain things. They also make sure that the powers that are not given to the government in the Constitution belong to the people, as long as they are not against the law. Let's learn them. Yeah, you can do it. Remember, there are 10 amendments that make up the Bill of Rights. We are going to look at them one by one, and you are going to learn them. Here we go. The First Amendment. Are you ready? No. Let us know. Are you ready to learn? The First Amendment. It's the first one. This is cool. The First Amendment. Are you ready? The First Amendment is a big one. The First Amendment gives us freedom of speech, freedom to practice whatever religion we want, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly. That means the freedom to gather together. And there are even more freedoms packed into the First Amendment. The First Amendment is a huge deal, and it may be the most well-known amendment in the Bill of Rights. Time to boogie!
Get ready to hollow scream with new episodes of The Loud House and The Casa Grandes.
All right, now it's time for the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, Amendment number 2. The Second Amendment gives us the right to bear arms. We couldn't resist featuring Clarence here, okay? But this isn't talking about actual bear arms, okay? This amendment doesn't mean we all have the freedom to have the arms of a bear. To bear arms means to carry a weapon. There are different perspectives on this amendment. Ask a parent or teacher about this amendment to learn more. All right, it's time for the Third Amendment. Amendment number 3. So what is the Third Amendment? Well, the Third Amendment guarantees that the United States government cannot put troops and soldiers in people's homes without their consent. This was an important amendment when it was signed because during the Revolutionary War, the British soldiers were allowed to stay in people's homes even if they didn't want them there. This bothered many of the colonists because it wasn't fair. The Third Amendment made sure that being forced to house soldiers in your home would be a thing of the past. Cool. Now it's time for the Fourth Amendment. Amendment number 4. The Fourth Amendment is really cool. The Fourth Amendment says that the United States government cannot unfairly search or take property from people. For example, before a police officer can search someone's home, they have to have a warrant from a judge. A warrant means that the judge agrees that the police should search that person's house. This amendment protects your private property from getting searched or taken without good reason. All right, the Fifth Amendment, Amendment number 5. The Fifth Amendment gives people the right to stay silent in court if they decide they do not want to testify. There is a phrase that comes from this amendment. When people say, I plead the Fifth, they are saying, I would rather not say. If someone does not want to speak, they must not be forced to. The Fifth Amendment also gives people the right to fair treatment in court. Okay, now it's time for the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment guarantees that people have a speedy and public trial. The word speedy means fast. This means that the government should not put off the trial for no reason, but should bring the trial in a fair amount of time. The Sixth Amendment also gives people who are accused of a crime the right to have a lawyer. A lawyer is someone who represents you in the court of law. If a person cannot get a lawyer on their own, the government has to provide one. The Sixth Amendment also guarantees people the right to know what crimes they are accused of and to speak face to face with the witnesses that are accusing them. All right, it's time for the Seventh Amendment. The Seventh Amendment guarantees that people have the right to be tried by a jury in civil cases. A jury is a group of regular citizens that decide a case instead of a judge. In this picture of a courtroom, where do you think the jury sits? Do you have a guess? Yeah, the jury would sit right here in a place in the courtroom called the jury box. All right, it's time for the Eighth Amendment, Amendment number 8. The Eighth Amendment ensures that the court's decisions are fair and just. The Eighth Amendment protects people from punishments that are cruel and unusual. Punishments must be reasonable for the crime. The Eighth Amendment also protects people from excessive bail. Bail is a payment people can make so that they can go home while they await trial. All right, we're almost to the end. The Ninth Amendment, Amendment number 9. So, what does the Ninth Amendment say? Well, the Ninth Amendment says that the Constitution does not list all of our rights. We have rights that aren't explicitly listed in the Constitution. For example, you have the right to build a snowman. If you want to build a snowman and play in the snow, you have the right to do that. But here's the thing, it doesn't say that in the Constitution. But just because it's not in the Constitution doesn't mean it's not a right of yours. You have these rights that aren't listed in the Constitution. Okay, here is the last amendment in the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment. It's pretty awesome. The 10th Amendment gives the power the United States government doesn't have to the states or to the people. Remember, the United States government is a republic. It's a government for the people, by the people. Hey, thanks for learning about the Bill of Rights.
1887 that created the framework of the federal government. It is called the highest law in the land because all other laws in the United States must follow the rules laid out in the Constitution. The story of the Constitution began in 1776 when the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee to write the Declaration of Independence. They realized that as soon as they were independent of Great Britain, they would need their own government, and so they appointed another committee to write a document that would lay out the rules governing their new country. These rules, called the Articles of Confederation, were completed in the fall of 1777. In order to become law, the Articles of Confederation needed to be ratified or formally agreed to by all 13 states, a process that took more than 3 years. In 1781, the Articles of Confederation were officially adopted, and the United States of America finally had its own government. It soon became obvious, however, that this new government had problems. Under the Articles of Confederation, the states operated like small, independent countries, and the central government wasn't strong enough to perform its duties. In 1787, a constitutional convention met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to discuss improvements to the Articles of Confederation, but it was soon decided that a brand new constitution was needed instead. With George Washington in charge, these delegates, known as the framers of the Constitution, set about creating a government that would meet the needs of their country. They needed a government that was strong enough to do its job, but not so strong that it could oppress the states. They needed to have the powers that belonged to the federal government and the powers that belonged to the states clearly established. They needed to protect the individual liberties of American citizens. Finally, they needed a way for future Americans to make changes to the Constitution without the need for a revolution. After months of debate and compromise, the Constitution was signed on September 17th, 1787, and by the following year, enough states had ratified it that it went into effect. At the time of its signing, the Constitution was made up of a preamble and 7 articles. The preamble was an introduction that told everyone what the Constitution was supposed to do. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. The first 3 articles of the Constitution created the branches of our government: the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Each branch would have different powers and have the ability to stop the other branches from growing too powerful in a system of checks and balances. The remaining articles spelled out relationships between the states and the federal government, how to make changes to the Constitution, how the Constitution could become law, and established it as the supreme or highest law in the land. Changes to the Constitution are called amendments, and the first amendments were made very soon after the Constitution was ratified. Some people were worried that the Constitution did not provide strong enough protections for individual rights. To fix this, the first 10 amendments, known as the Bill of Rights, were added to the Constitution in 1791. The Bill of Rights spells out rights that individuals have in the United States, such as freedom of speech and religion, as well as rights that people have when they are accused of a crime. Finally, the Bill of Rights says that people can have other rights that are not spelled out in the Constitution, and that any power not given to the federal government belongs to the states. Since then, the Constitution has been amended 17 more times, for a total of 27 amendments. Some famous amendments include the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery, the 15th Amendment, which allowed people to vote regardless of their race or skin color, the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, and the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age to 18. The Constitution of the United States is the oldest single document in history that is still being used to run a country and has inspired other governments all around the world. Because it was designed to protect the rights of the people, prevent individual parts of the government from becoming too powerful, and change over time to meet the needs of the country, it has not needed to be replaced for well over 200 years, and may easily continue to guide the country far into the future. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Constitution of the United States of America today. Goodbye.